Hi, and welcome back. We're having a discussion. I'm having a discussion with Dr. Paul Herrick. Dr. Herrick is the author of the textbook that we've been using in our course, Think with Socrates. In the first video, we discussed a little bit about Dr. Herrick's authoring of his 3 logic texts, and then this wonderful book on Socrates and critical thinking. Dr. Herrick, I want to turn the topic a little bit now to the practical side of teaching logic. A lot of students haven't gone through this course. I've taught this course now for 2 quarters, Logic and Computational Thinking. And at some point, students get bogged down. They just run into some conceptual issues. And I see students kind of dropping off or dropping out of the course because the concepts get a little bit too challenging, a little bit too difficult. So you said in the last video, you've taught logic in the classroom and online for 35 years, which is a long time, a lot longer than I have. I wanted to see if you have any guidance. So as students get into this work, what kinds of challenges do you see students encountering quarter after quarter after quarter? Is there a pattern that you saw maybe earlier in your career that you've helped students get past through the way that you taught the course? Or what challenges do you see on a regular basis that students tend to run into, and how do you help students get past those challenges?
Well, one issue that comes up often is logic is a very abstract subject.
Mm-hmm.
And being abstract, some students can find it dry and dull. And as a result, they will maybe skim the material because they don't find it very interesting. And logic has a nature that if you skim the material, sometimes you'll think you understand it. And then when it comes to taking the test, you'll realize that you thought you understood it, but you don't understand it. So you'll read the definitions, you'll read the ideas, you'll think about them briefly, and then when it comes to applying them on a test, you'll make a lot of mistakes. And the mistakes indicate that you didn't really grasp the ideas. And what that teaches students, and what I try to emphasize to students, is that this is a subject that you have to practice. It's like algebra. You can't make it through an algebra course without practicing. You can be taught how to factor a polynomial, but you need to factor 10 polynomials before it really sinks in, before your mind really gets a grip on it. And logic is like that. You have to take the abstract concepts and apply them to real arguments and real reasoning processes many times before they sink in. And that's my advice to any student. And there are payoffs to this. There are a number of studies that have shown that students who study logic do better in math.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
And these are controlled studies that show that logic improves mathematical abilities and improves reasoning abilities. And many times in the classroom, I have given reasoning tests to students at the start of the quarter and at the end of the quarter, anonymous reasoning tests.
Sure.
And students who stick with it find that the study of logic does improve their reasoning abilities.
That's really excellent, yeah.
And there's a lot of patterns of reasoning that mislead us. Mm-hmm. They look like they're good reasoning, and they're not. And so students who haven't studied reasoning carefully and don't pay attention to their reasoning can get caught in these traps that look like they're good reasoning when they're not. And in fact, this is why Aristotle, the founder of logic, wrote a whole book on this. He wrote a book called Sophistical Refutations, and it was a study of logical fallacies that are patterns of reasoning that look good on the surface. Mm-hmm. And if you don't think too hard and you're not self-reflective, they can fool you. And they're called fallacies, and the study of logic can help you avoid fallacies. And it can help you identify them and spot them in others' thinking. Today, there's a group of people who specialize in fallacies. They're called politicians. I shouldn't get political here, but I will say that, and I'm not being partisan here, but fallacies have long been the tool of the corrupt politician who uses faulty reasoning to sway the masses.
Since the time of Plato, right? Plato
Since
wrote
the
about
time
this
of Plato,
in the
I mean,
Republic.
Socrates and Plato and Aristotle defined a tyrant as an individual who uses faulty logic to sway the crowd, to give him power, which he then uses for his own self-interest and to reduce the freedom of the people and harm the body politic.
Sure.
So anyway, logic can help you reason better, and there are studies that show it.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. Paul and I will have this conversation later on in the course. We'll have another video that we'll record on that very topic. We'll actually work through some arguments and show you some fallacious reasoning. And of course, the rest of the course, Logic and Computational Thinking, talks about that as well. So the lesson here, the recommendation is you're going to get stuck. There's going to be parts of the course where you're going to get bogged down, and you might be tempted to throw your hands up and say, I can't get this. But I think our message is you can get this. You can definitely figure this out. I like to tell my students all the time, there's going to be a point in the course as you're studying where things are going to start to click. You're going to see it. It's going to be completely opaque, and you're not going to be able to figure out what's going on. Then all of a sudden you'll try a practice test, or you'll go through one of the exercises and you'll say, oh, I finally get it now. It makes sense to me. So I think your recommendation after 35 years of teaching is persist, practice, try to apply what you're learning in the real world, and it will come. You can figure it out. You can get past the hurdles. So that's, I think, a very important message that we both want to give to you as students is to stick with it.
And sometimes it comes very fast.
Yes, that's right.
I've seen students on one day, there's a certain logical process and they're stuck and they can't solve it and they can't work it and they're frustrated. And I've seen them come in the very next day and it has all become clear to them. It's just all, the clouds have parted and all of a sudden they're just a whiz. It's just, there's a certain sort of a point where they see it.
Yes.
It's like a eureka moment.
Yes, correct.
And this happens all the time in logic. And when that happens, a lot of students, they're so proud of themselves and so happy that they kept pushing and then they made the breakthrough. And it's a good experience. I see it all the time in logic class.
Yes, and it's actually a great feeling when that happens, when you get over that hump.
Yeah.
The other thing that I can't emphasize enough, you said this and I totally agree with you, is practice this stuff in the real world. Right? If someone's trying to convince you of something, see if you can analyze what they're trying to convince you of and the reasons that they're giving for trying to get you to believe that that thing is true. That exercise, I've studied philosophy formally in my graduate program 20 years ago, and I've been trying to do this ever since. And the more you do it, the better you get at doing it, and it really actually helps you understand how to construct your own arguments better, as well as analyze the arguments of others. So practice in the real world as well as the academic world in the exercises that we give you. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about success stories. So, like we said in the first video, logic can be a little bit academic, a little bit esoteric to people, but we've both seen logic actually help people be successful, and where they can apply the learnings that they've taken from the classroom and show them in the real world. I want to read a couple of quotes here. You sent me one in email prior to our getting together. This was from a student that Paul had. The student said, "Thank you for a great quarter. I had a fun time, if you can believe it, a fun time learning logic, a subject I really knew nothing about when going into the quarter, and so I learned a lot. I love the abstraction of logic and its application to the real world." So this student apparently sees it as abstract, but then also very applicable. And then she said, "I would definitely say my skill level in reasoning has improved. Thank you for your dedication to your students and your evident passion for the subject and teaching of the subject." And I know you've heard that a lot over the years.
Well, I didn't expect that to be part of this. I sent that to Paul yesterday or the day before. It was a student this quarter. But that's a common comment from students.
And I had a student from Angola, Africa, actually write this in this recent quarter that I taught. "Thanks to Professor Paul Party and Microsoft for the course offer, the classes, the teaching material, and the teaching methodology. They're all excellent. I was pleased to learn about logic and apply this methodology in professional and personal life." And to me, that's what it's all about, right? Taking the concepts from the classroom, the digital classroom or the brick and mortar classroom, and then using those concepts in the real world. That just makes it all worth it for sure. Any other comments on that? Students that have come back after years and said,
Well,
I really use this in the.
Well, an older student emailed me just the other day, and she said, she was in the online logic class, and she said her son had taken logic and he would challenge her and logically, and she didn't know how to answer him. And she said now that she'd taken the class, she could answer her son and reason with him better than she ever had before. I was very pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
But in real life, once you've studied reasoning, once you've studied logic, the study of the principles of correct reasoning, and you're aware that there are standards of reasoning, that not all reasoning is equal. When someone is making a bad decision or presenting you with something that you're sure is probably false, you can do what Socrates did. You can say, what is your evidence? Why do you think that's true? Why do you think that's a good thing to do? And then you can patiently and carefully help them think through their reasoning. And if it is a bad decision, you're going to find a hole. You're going to find a fallacy. If it's a false proposition they're presenting, you're going to find why it's false. And logicians recommend that you patiently talk with the person and find the hole in their reasoning, find the mistake, not in an insulting way,
Correct, yes.
but in a charitable way. Try to draw their attention to the problem. But that's where reasoning can play a big role in everyday life. And I will just say is, when I look back on my life, I see a lot of mistakes I've made in my life and in my thinking, where, if I could go back and in time, I would say, why are you doing that? Or why are you concluding that? Think about this, think about this. Most of the mistakes in my life have been due to bad reasoning.
Sure.
And the more carefully you reason, the better your life choices tend to be. That's simply a fact of experience.
Yes, and of course the premise of this course is that the reasoning that you can apply to real life not only helps you in interpersonal relationships and problems, but actually helps you become a better programmer or a better computer scientist. So you can apply the concepts both directly, deductive and inductive reasoning, but also indirectly through the way that you interact with other human beings. So there's a lot of value in applying yourself to this material. Well, thanks for that, Paul. Again, I appreciate your insights into this. I think, the many years that you've taught, the fact that you've written 4 books on logic and critical thinking gives you a lot of credibility in terms of your guidance to students. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about these topics. So again, the message is consistent. Apply consistent work to the coursework. You can get through this and be successful. And our message to you is that if you do apply yourself, and you work hard, you'll find the value in this coursework. Even if at times it seems a little boring or doesn't seem like it's going to apply to your life, do the discipline of going through the exercises, reading the material, and you will find benefit. So thanks. Enjoy the course.
Thank you.